Good afternoon and Happy New Year. Welcome to our Virtual Alumni Speaker Series. My name is Brandon Haberjack, class of 2006, and I'm the Director of Alumni Engagement and Giving at the school. After taking a brief pause in the fall due to a busy reunion season, we're excited to kick off the 2022 Speaker Series with Tom Leonard, class of 1967. Tom, welcome back to Pittsburgh, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. It's nice to be back in the Burgh.
Tom is currently the owner of Leonard Strategic Advantage, a consulting firm that works with presidents, CEOs, and business owners in the areas of financial performance, customer acquisition and retention, management effectiveness, and growth and innovation. Tom grew up in the Greenfield neighborhood and came to Central by way of St. Rosalia's. After attending Central Catholic and having an incredible football career, Tom went on to graduate from Cornell University in 1971. Tom has over 40 years of business knowledge. He began his career in sales and sales management with Procter & Gamble, and then went on to become the Vice President of Sales and Sales Marketing at Wilson Sporting Goods. By the age of 40, Tom would become the president of Samsonite Luggage and subsequently 4 other companies, including Dippin' Dots Ice Cream and Aspen Pet Products. Our session today will be a 45-minute session consisting of 25 to 30 minutes of presentation from Mr. Leonard, followed by 10 to 15 minutes of question and answer that we'll type your questions in the chat bar and the question and answer feature as you have them, and we'll get to them when Tom wraps up his presentation today. So without further ado, I'd now like to turn it over to Tom Leonard to share his thoughts on leadership.
Thank you, Brandon. Let me do this from the beginning. Okay, let me give you a little bit of background on how I got to this topic. About the end of June, Claude Taney, she is the president of United Way in Charleston, and that's where I lived at the time. She asked me if I would share some thoughts on leadership. And she, with a group of executive directors for nonprofits. Well, I instantly said yes to Claude because I like her. And then I thought, I'm going to give a presentation, shared some thoughts on leadership. You know what? I don't think there's any one generally accepted definition of leadership. So I did what I tell my children to do if they don't know an answer to something. And I said, well, you know what? Just Google it. So I Googled leadership, and here's what Google says: the action of leading a group of people or an organization. Well, gee, thanks, Google. That's a big help. I'm presenting to a group of executive directors for nonprofits. So they clearly lead organizations and they lead a group of people. So that was not a big help. I wasn't sharing much in terms of thoughts on leadership with that particular Google definition. So it comes back to my point. There is no one generally accepted leadership theory that I know about. So I've looked at plenty of them over the years, and here's one that I particularly like myself. And that is someone who continually sets and achieves goals. Someone who continually sets and achieves goals. Now, I set goals in grade school. I set them when I was at Central Catholic. I set them in college. I am still setting them in business to this day. Well, let's talk about some famous people that were known as leaders to see if they set and achieve goals. First one I want to pick is George Washington. George actually had an audacious goal, and that was independence. No country that ever broken loose from either a king or a dictatorship or whoever the ruling party was. George set this bold goal of independence. Now, he set other goals prior to that. One of the key goals he had was he could not lose his army. If he lost his army, we would still be part of the British Commonwealth somehow. So he had to make sure he didn't lose his army before he could get to independence and an ultimate victory. So he fought a bunch of battles, like on Long Island, where he fought and he got pushed against the East River. He retreated his whole army across the East River onto Manhattan to save his army. He was in some little tactical battles for morale, like when he went across the Delaware to capture the Hessians at Trenton, and he won at Princeton, and those things helped buoy up American spirit at the time. But he generally took that war and did not lose his army until he was able to pin Cornwallis in on Yorktown, and with the French, defeated Cornwallis and led to our ultimate independence. So George Washington set and achieved goals. He set lots more as president, of course, but he set and achieved goals. How about Abraham Lincoln? When the Civil War started, he set a simple goal. He just wanted to preserve the Union. Well, during that bloody, awful 4 to 5 year war, what he ended up doing was saying, we need to have total victory. He set it as a goal, and we're going to end slavery. So he set and achieved goals. Let's move to the South. Robert E. Lee. Most people think that Robert E. Lee commanded all the Confederate troops, but he just had the Army of Northern Virginia. And there, most everyone that they sent to take on Lee, he beat them. He'd do sweeps around the end. He'd do flank attacks. He would attack head on as appropriate. And ultimately, he was worn out by General Grant and the superior men and materiel that the North had. Now, I'm not going to talk about these two guys' merits, but Genghis Khan and Adolf Hitler were recognized to be leaders too. Do you think they set and achieved goals? I'll let you decide that yourself. Okay, let me move to so that's my definition. Let me move to the agenda. The first topic I'm going to cover is background. Now, Brandon took care of a little bit of that, so I will talk about where my background influenced my leadership philosophies and theories. Then I'm going to tell you about a management system I put into place in my 20s, and it was called IPS Easy. So it's IPS Easy Management. Sounds like it's easy. Well, it's never easy. The third area is the Founding Fathers on Leadership. I was given a book for Christmas of 1997, and this was the book, Founding Fathers on Leadership. And I was kind of busy that year, and I put the book on the bookshelf, never read it until during 2020, when we were all locked up during the pandemic. And so I looked at this, and there's some philosophies in the Founding Fathers and their views of leadership that I really like. So I'm going to talk about a couple things there, and then you can take all the notes you'd like on what I'm talking about. But I'm going to come back later and tell you that leadership is as easy as 1, 2, 3. And I'll say that with a smile. If you look at the bottom of the page, says that's Chloe Knight Tani. She said to the group, I want a sharing of thoughts. And if we were face to face, we could do that because I like questions as we go. But Brandon's going to put those together. You can type them in the question or in the chat box, and we will get to them when I finish up this presentation. Okay, so I'm going to give you background on leadership, and I do a lot of facilitations. And one of the questions I ask, sort of break the ice, not that I like icebreakers much, is how many of you, so I'll ask you, how many of you think I played football for more than a decade? More than 10 years? Well, the only people that put their hands up generally were ones that said, that's such an odd question. It must be true. And I will tell you that I did play football for 11 years. The first 3, Brandon mentioned, I was from Greenfield. Back then, in the 60s, the Catholic schools had football teams. So I played 3 years at St. Rosalia's. We have one of those 3 years was undefeated, and we lost only 1 game each of the other 2 years. So it started to give me the will to win. I then played 4 years at Central Catholic, but the first year was at the Morningside Bulldogs, and they were undefeated also. And then I played 4 years at Cornell. Now, what football did is give me that will to win. And if you want to be a good leader, you have to have the will to win. You have to win for your team, and you have to win for the goals that you set. And it also gives you the courage to lead. You know, if you play sports, that's most people won't do that. So it gives you the courage to lead. So I'm not limiting this to football, nor am I limiting this to other sports. I'm going to take it to extracurriculars. So if you're in Central Catholic right now and you're watching this, you should become involved in extracurriculars. When I went to Central, they had a great forensics program, and it always placed in the top 3 in Pennsylvania. And I'll bet Central's forensic team is still that good. You talk about the will to win, those guys wanted to win. They wanted to win on a regular basis. And the courage to lead, one of the biggest things that concerns people was speaking in public. So it gave you the courage to be able to lead and speak in public. So my short is, get involved in extracurriculars because they will help you with leadership roles in the future. Okay, I was recruited by many schools to play football. I was also recruited when I was finished to be a professional soap salesman with Procter & Gamble. So I did that for 14 months and I was promoted to sales manager at the age of 23. And we'll come back to that when we talk about It's Easy. I was recruited in my mid-20s, thought I'd be with Procter forever because they're an outstanding company, but I was recruited by PepsiCo to Wilson Sporting Goods. Where else do you put ex-dumb jocks? So off I went and I was fortunate enough there to become vice president of marketing at age 30. And then I was recruited in my mid-30s to Samsonite, the luggage company, and I was fortunate enough there to be president of Samsonite from age 40 to 50. And I've been president of 4 other companies since, including Dippin' Dots, as Brandon mentioned. Now, the Dippin' Dots thing didn't work out as well as I'd like. So in 2009, I moved to Charleston, and I started to facilitate strategic plans, sales training, and management leadership training. I did that for the past 12 years. I've just moved back to the Pittsburgh area, so I'll look into doing some of that here. But I am still the executive director for the Trident CEO Council. That's a group of 30 of the top CEOs in Charleston and Metro Charleston. So I'm the executive director of that group. And that group stands for Progress for Responsible Growth in the Charleston area. And I was also campaign cabinet chairman for United Way for 2 years, which is probably why Claude Tani asked me to speak. Okay, so I have a little bit of leadership background. Let's talk about my It's Easy management system. So I became manager at age 23. Procter & Gamble is a wonderful company. When I became a salesman, they gave you a sales manual on how to sell and the steps and what you should be doing. They gave you plenty of instruction and training. When you became a manager, they gave you a sales manager manual. And it told you how to have a sales meeting. It taught you how to recruit people. It taught you how to interview. Everything was in it. But at age 23, I had 6 people reporting to me. They were clearly all older than me, 2 of them old enough to be my father. So I needed some cultural way based around values and things I thought were important to be able to lead that group. So I came up with It's Easy, and the I stands for integrity. And integrity is one of the key things you have to have as a good leader. Integrity is the key to trust. And to be a good leader, you have to be trusted. It's that simple. Now, when I started selling, my trainer, we had a plant shutdown. He said, Leonard, your orders aren't big enough. You didn't write big enough orders for this plant shutdown. So why don't you just bump them up some? I said, I can't do that. I mean, my customers will know. He said, oh, they'll never know. I said, but more importantly, I'll know. So integrity is key. To be a good leader, you have to be yourself and you have to be full of integrity. And I think we learned a little bit about that at Central Catholic. Okay, so integrity is the start to this management system. The next key issue is planning. Believe it or not, we made average 12 calls a day at Procter & Gamble, and we had a plan for 3 items. So you don't get to 12 calls a day unless you geographically plan them in a specific area. So we would make 12 calls a day, and you'd have to plan for 3 items for each call. Now, it's the thing I don't like about what I do. I love doing strategic planning and sales training and team leadership, but the night before, I have to prepare for that. Do you think I may have prepared for today's discussion? Probably. So planning's a key. And then you need the next step. The S is for a systematic approach. We had 9 steps to a chiropractor. We had 4 basic responsibilities. And you could say, well, Tom, that's about selling soap. But I'll tell you who's cleaning up the world right now is Google and Amazon. Guess what they're doing? They are doing digital processes, and digital processes are planned, systematic approaches to gaining more business, and gaining more business they are. Now, when I got set for today, Brandon sent me a very planned and systematic approach to what I was supposed to do for today. So Brandon's working on his leadership skills and abilities too. Let me move to easy. The E is for make it easy for your people. If you're a leader, you've heard this, you're supposed to be the water bearer, etc. There is plenty of truth to that. If you make it easy for your people, they will follow you. They will love you if you do that. Example that I have is when I was a proctor, we had 33 stock keeping units. And when I went to Wilson Sporting Goods, we had 5,000 to 7,000 stock keeping units. At Proctor, we had pre-printed order forms. So I started putting pre-printed order forms together. At Wilson, we just had a blank order pad. Started putting pre-printed order pads together for my people. And guess what? They wrote more. We had a bunch of closeouts in the consumer hard goods business. And I put those together into packages that I thought would really sell, and they did, and we sold more. Make it easy for your people, and they will achieve even better goals. Go around as a leader, ask your people, how can I make your job easier? How can I make it easier? And then see if you can come up with a solution for them. The next step may be one of the most important. So I have C, but I actually have 3 C's here. Constantly be clear and communicate with your people. I cannot overemphasize the issue of constantly communicating with your people if you're going to be a good leader. So think about this. There's 2 types of communication, formal and informal. This is a formal presentation. If you get memos or emails from your company or your organization, that's formal communication. If you run meetings, those should be formal communication also. Well, what's informal communication? Well, that would be the grapevine. And I will tell you that any company, any organization you're in has a grapevine. And the grapevine, if you don't communicate properly, will fill it in the way they would like to. They'll start making stories up and they will fill it in. So if you want to control, and you can control the grapevine via communication on a regular basis. If you don't communicate enough, the grapevine will be vibrant. Okay, so that's the C, and a very important C. Let me move to the I for innovation. Quite simply, innovation is, how can you find a better way to do what you're doing? We ask that question. There's got to be a better way to do what we're doing. Innovation comes down to you as a leader trying to find a better way to do what you're doing. Part of that's helpful by asking people, how can I make it easier for you? But here's a couple examples. Wilson Sporting Goods took those 20-foot containers that go on ships and filled it with baseball gloves. So they had a port of entry program. Well, when I was with Wilson, I said, why don't we take that same concept and go to a tennis ball factory and fill a truck full of tennis balls? So I presented that to the management of Wilson. They humored me, said, let the kid do it, he'll never sell any. And all of a sudden I started selling truckloads of tennis balls out to California. And they said, oh, let's make a nationwide program out of that. Another thing, I just took the same port of entry issue when I was at Aspen Pet, and we put leashes and collars. So you could say, how can you put 20 foot of leashes and collars in a container? Well, people like Petco, PetSmart, and Walmart loved the idea. We really did well with that. If you're innovative, the short of it is, find a better way to move ahead. Okay, so that moves me to the third topic, which is the Founding Fathers on Leadership. As I mentioned, I got that at Christmas '97, and I read it 2 years during the pandemic. So it was last year. And I like some of the principles, including this first one, which says leadership is leaders acting. So one of the keys to being a good leader is to act, as well as, and this is even more important, caring, inspiring, and persuading others to act. You need to move the people that you're leading to act. And what you want to do is you focus it around goals again, for certain shared goals that are in line with the wants, the needs, the aspirations, and the expectations of the people they represent. No, by the way, themselves too. But if you do it around the people that you represent, they love it. This one particularly fond for me. The genius of leadership, the genius lies in the manner in which leaders care about, visualize, and act. Care about your people. You want to be a good leader, care about your people, visualize where you want them to go, and then you act and have them act to get done, to be in line with their values and their motivations. Okay, I had a 6-step, it's easy. The founding fathers had a 5-step approach. So the first step of that was to create a simple vision. Now I will tell you, when I do strategic planning, the first thing I work on is a vision. And a vision is not your mission, which is what you do. A vision is where you want to go. Where do you want your organization to be in 3 years to 5 years? Where would you like to take it? One of the ones I always liked was Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream, because it helped move people, and they knew that through time and education, things would get even better, and we're still working on that one. When I was at Samsonite, our company came up, our employees came up with a vision, which was building the world's best products and services meet or exceed our customers' expectations, but it was building the world's best, and everyone on our line knew what that was on all our lines. Well, the founding fathers came up with a very simple one. They came up with a one-word vision, and you heard me talk about it earlier. That was independence. Now, here's a wonderful vision. That's where they wanted to be in 3 to 5 years. Took them about 5 years to get there. Everyone understood it. It motivated them to get to independence. So if you want to be a good leader, have a vision for your group of where you want to take that group in 3 to 5 years. Next point is develop a strong culture. And I would say cultures go around what's your vision, where you're heading, your values. You know what your values are. If you don't have them, you should write them down. I have 6 values, and I know what they are. And then mission is what you do on a regular basis. So that gets your culture. You want to develop a very strong culture, and we had a strong culture during the revolution. The next step they had, set goals. Gee, no wonder I liked them. And if we were face to face, I would say, okay, who can tell me what a SMART goal is? Because I use the best way to do goals is SMART goals. So I will tell you that the S stands for specific, the M stands for measurable. The goal should be measurable. The A for most people is achievable. Well, I've changed that to accountable. Someone has to be accountable to get the goal done. The R is for realistically high. So you want to push yourself to get that goal. And the T is for a timeline. You want to get it done in a quarter, in a half year, in a year, in 3 years. What's the timeline that you will set for that particular goal? Their next point was communicate. Update progress as often as possible. Gets back to the whole communication issue that we talked about in It's Easy. When the Declaration of Independence came out, George Washington had his troops lined up, and he had the Declaration of Independence read to them. And he said, gentlemen, this is what you're fighting for. I lived in Charleston, as I said, the last dozen years, and it was read in 3 places in Charleston. It's the Exchange Building, where it's just where the British used to accept customs. It was at the Liberty Tree that was in Charleston at the time, and it was read in a 3rd location. They read the Declaration of Independence so that people knew what they were fighting for. And then the final step is execute and accomplish your goals. My favorite saying is strategies are grand, but execution is crucial. A lot of people put things together, but then they don't execute them. So I execute them. And the best way I found to do that is through Peter Drucker. Most of you should know who Peter Drucker is. He was a management guru, and he came up with this system of management by objectives. If you don't know what it is, you should Google that and look it up. So that was their steps. Okay, I'm going to move to, it's as easy as 1, 2, 3, and I will do this with a smile as I go through. So the first step is build trust, communicate with your people. Build trust, communicate with your people. Oh, Leonard, you cheated. You put 2 on there. But I will tell you, one of the ways that you build trust is through communication. And that trust comes about through integrity that we talked about. You want to be a good leader, your people have to trust you. You have to be you. You have to be consistent. And you have to communicate with your people. You have to be out among them, because that way they trust you. That's 1. Step 2, and you haven't heard this at all, train your people, then delegate. Train your people. Procter & Gamble has an outstanding training program. They're known for it. They were very structured in how they train me as a salesman and as a sales manager. When I went to PepsiCo, they were also very good at training people on a regular basis. When I was president of Samsonite, one of my top 5 suppliers was Milliken, and Roger Milliken himself made his managers take 40 hours of training a year, his managers. And for them to get a raise, they had to show Mr. Milliken how they did their 40 hours. And the reason he did that is he wanted his people to be able to delegate. He wanted his people to have trust, and he wanted his people communicating. So train your people and then delegate. Now, as leaders, sometimes we don't want to delegate things, but as a good leader, you have to delegate. So pick out what you want to keep for yourself, but then figure out what you can delegate. And I will tell you, when you delegate, there's at least 3 advantages to delegation. The first one is when you delegate something to someone, you save that time. Instead of you doing it, they're doing it for you. That's the first one. The second one's more important. And the second one is this gives you the opportunity to observe people and say, who steps up, who in fact accomplishes and does that process in the right way. So it gives you the opportunity to observe, and it gives the person you've delegated to the ability to grow. And the third one benefit to delegation is this: we know how to do things just right. How many times have you given something to someone and they've come back and they have done faster or better? They think through it, and particularly right now where younger folks are being able to digitize a number of things. When you delegate, sometimes it comes out even better. When it's even better, that's innovation in my book. Okay, the final one is lead, inspire your team, and innovate. Okay, now I really cheated. I used 3. But to be a good leader, you do have to lead. There was a line in the movie Midway, which said, Chester Nimitz, you told me if you're a leader, lead. And as leader, you have to lead your people, but to get things done, you have to inspire them, because, bosses can tell us what to do. We may or may not do it. You have to be inspired to want to do that. So leadership and inspiration go hand in hand. And if you would really want to be a good leader, I had to stick my innovation in there, because you need to make things even better. You need to take your group to the next level. So that is what I have to share on leadership. I am ready for an open discussion with thoughts and comments. And Brandon, I can stop sharing, and then they can see just the 2 of us.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate the presentation. A lot of great stuff there. Communication piece is key, and we talked a little bit about that earlier, sort of when we got on, and from experience with doing the speaker series and such. To be calculated, to be specific, and to communicate exactly what you want folks to do, I think is I think that really came through in your presentation. So at this point, we will take some questions and answers. So in the Q&A section that is at the bottom of the screen, feel free to type in any questions that you have. And I'll sort of kick it off with a question of my own here for you, Tom. Over the years, I'm sure you've come across some incredible leaders and maybe some leaders that were not that great, but is there anybody that stands out to you, either at Central or Cornell or through your work history, that that has influenced your leadership style, or somebody that you kind of point to as a mentor, that really, with everything that you presented to us today, kind of speaks that, lives that? Does anybody come to mind that you've come across?
Yeah, I have two. They're both from the business point of view. And the first is Malcolm Canlish, and it was when I was at Wilson Sporting Goods. And Malcolm was born in Liverpool, and he had been a McKinsey guy. So he helped mentor me and teach me a number of the things we did. He was the one I got put into marketing at age 29, never had taken a marketing course. And within the year, he liked what I was able to do. I was able to put ideas together in Procter & Gamble's one-page presentation. And he promoted me to vice president of marketing at the age of 30. No marketing courses, and it was golf, and I don't even like the golf, but I was vice president of golf marketing because it was about business. So he was a great mentor to me. The other one is a gentleman named Steve Green, who was my boss at Samsonite. And Steve was a guy that had that integrity that I talked about. We could argue over judgment issues, but he never misled once. He had outstanding integrity. He was super smart to boot, but he had some of those very principles that I hold on to as what I think is right. So those were two of the fine leaders. I must say that Marty Apostolico was my coach back at Central, and Marty Apostolico was absolutely wonderful because he trained us, and he was good about, he would help get everyone into proper colleges. So I made the Ivy League schools. Dino Foligno went to Villanova. He picked out the right level for everyone and sent the recruiters to them, because there were plenty of people coming to Central because we were quite good. We were quite good then, and I think you're still pretty good right now. Make the championship 8 of the last 9 years. That's all.
Yes, well, that's actually a nice segue into our next question. In what ways did your education in your 4 years at Central Catholic help to develop you as a leader?
It was the basics that I got there. What was interesting is I never took advanced placement courses because they were just starting, but I had the basics. And when I got to Cornell, these guys that all had advanced placement courses, and they were retaking. Back then, you couldn't take credit for it, so they're all taking the same classes again. So the basics of reading, writing, and arithmetic that I learned at Central and science all held very well for me. So my first year was a little rough, but then I was doing much better because I learned to study. I learned to study at Central, but I learned to study even more so when I got to college. So the basics of my academics and what I got was outstanding, and that was without taking advanced placement courses because they were just starting back then, and not too many of the football players took them then.
Great. Our next question here, Tom, in your experience, in speaking to leadership as easy as 1, 2, 3, where is the biggest breakdown? Where does that come in when you see, effective leaders versus leaders that are not so effective? Is it, what area of that, I would say, or what recommendations do you have in terms of things to avoid within that system? Where is the biggest breakdown?
Well, the biggest, if you have lack of integrity, and I've worked with some people like that, you have lack of integrity, that's the starter or the stopper, if you will. I mean, then you're just being dictated to. So that's the biggest piece that will get to it. But leadership itself is very complicated. It's I didn't even talk about decisiveness. To be a good leader, you have to be decisive. And I knew that was missing out of there. And you have to have processes like backward timetables. So there's no one simple answer to. That's why there's no simple answer to leadership, because you need to embody those. You need to lead. You truly need to lead, and you need to communicate. And people that aren't such good leaders, if you think about it, so directed to the audience, if you think about it, some of the worst people you've been, they didn't communicate very well. They didn't set goals that anyone knew. You had meetings without agendas and direction. You just sort of get in there a meeting and waste your time. So good leaders, it's a complicated, it's all those things that I talked about in there and probably a little bit more.
Great.
No, absolutely a little bit more.
We'll take one last question here, and it comes in
Okay.
from your classmate, Mike McGrath. They said, great
Hello, Mike
presentation.
McGrath.
Yes. How did Lee recover after his loss at Gettysburg?
He just, Mr. Lee just headed south, and because he was an intelligent guy, I think he probably knew that was it. When he couldn't take the war to the north, he had lost at Antietam the year before, and once he lost at Gettysburg, he probably figured it was finished, but he fought for his cause. And so I don't think he took it very well, Michael. And Michael, thank you for teaching at Central for so many years. I truly appreciate, I admire that.
Yeah. Well, that's all the time that we have for today. I'd like to thank Tom again for spending time with us here to kick off our 2022 speaker series. Thanks for everybody that joined at home or at work virtually today. A recording of today's session is going to be posted on our YouTube channel shortly. So if you'd like to view it again or send it to a classmate or friend, please feel free to do so. We are currently working on our next speaker within the series, and really excited about it. We'll be sharing details regarding that shortly in the next week or two. So hopefully you'll join us again at some point this spring. So thanks again for everybody for joining, and I'd like to wish you the best here this afternoon. St. John Baptist de La Salle, pray for us. Live Jesus in our hearts forever. Thanks again, Tom.
See ya.
We'll see you.